Here we are. We are learning about the popular topic of prophecy. And we mentioned that there were certain prerequisites that we need to become prophets. And we also said that there were schools of prophets. And that the schools of prophets were learning what it means to put oneself in a state where they could receive a prophetic broadcast. The prophetic broadcast would come into the koyach hadimoyin, the imaginative sensory faculty of the mind, maybe the pineal gland. We'll have to see what these parts of the brain are. And then it was up to the prophet, through what's called the koyach haseichel, to take that vision and then to translate it into their own personal prophecy. So now we're going to go deeper in to the journey of the prophet. So it says when he goes into the Pardes, he starts going and understanding deeper parts of God. V'yamoshech ba'oisan ha'inyonim, ha'gedolen ha'rechoikim. He starts understanding great things that are far away. Meaning conceptually, he starts understanding things. Sometimes described if somebody could never see. And all of a sudden they open their eyes, everything is a new reality. There's things that I could have never imagined if my eyes were always closed. Or imagine a person could never hear. And all of a sudden, they can hear. Could you imagine them listening to music for the first time? It's like a reality they couldn't even have imagined. And for the prophet, that's an analogy of what they were experiencing. They started to experience something beyond what they could have imagined. They're receiving something from a different level of experience, something what's called beyond the five senses. And he has what's called das nechoina. So before we said das rechava, which we explained means that the prophet has to be able to understand. This is all prerequisites. The prophet has to be able to understand many things in the world, and then nechoina, he understands what they mean. And then v'hu miskadesh v'hoylech, he starts going on this journey. V'poirish medarke klal ha'am ha'holchim b'machshake azman. Now, one of the parts of the journey of the prophet is he separates himself from normal rat race. Now, we're going to see that doesn't mean that he can't be in the rat race. He's just not a rat. Meaning, he can interact with people, but he's not lost in that world. That for the prophet, one of the ways of achieving this is he has to become sensitive to almost distance a little bit, to be able to just to refine his senses. V'hoylech u'mezarez atzmoi u'melamed nafshoy shaloi tialoi machshava klal be'echad midvarim betelem. Interesting. Meaning him leaving kind of the rat race of the world is not that he intrinsically has to leave it. It's just that he learns to not be caught in it. For the prophet, if anything is pulling him into this world for its own sake, for the world's sake, then his sensitivities are lost. He has to be able to totally be above. And according to the Rambam especially, when it said that he's a gibor, Ezu gibor, hakoivesh es yitzroi. He's somebody that is Yetzer Hara and never gets the best of him. He's a master. This is like Rabbi Dodber stuff. He's mamish a master. He's a master. Somebody who's a master over his base desires is somebody who's now opening up these higher faculties of his mind, and he realizes that he's in charge of his base emotions. So that is a self-perfection process, which is sensitizing his koyach hadimayin and creating the fertile framework where he's able to then receive the broadcast of prophecy. V'loi mehevlei azman, he also doesn't get caught in what's called hevlei azman. What's hevel? So it's interesting. So I think generally probably that would be hevel. Hevel, the word itself means like just hot air. Hevel havalim, like King Solomon said. Hakol hevel. Hevel havalim hakol. Everything is just, I think Art Scroll says emptiness. It's just hot air. He's just saying hot air. Meaning hevel means there's nothing there. There's nothing there. What do you mean? These guys are like, talking all the time about all sorts of stuff. Is there any God consciousness in that speech? So he leaves the hevle hazman. He leaves the world where there's a lot of action, but there's no real substance to it. This doesn't mean he can't talk about politics, or he can't talk about music or cuisine, but all of it has to do with God. That's what it means. He's just careful of things of this world. He's poirish, but it doesn't mean he leaves forever. It just means that he's sensitive to not just getting lost in this world, but tach b'loisav. And he's also not caught up in what the Rambam calls tach b'loisav. How can I just conquer? The strategies of just conquering the world, whether that be through business, through politics, whatever it is. He's not caught up in tachbuloisav. Ella is a big Ella. So what is the prophet occupied with? Daitoi tamid penuya lamala. His das is always open or turned above. Meaning, he doesn't have to leave this world, but as long as he's in this world, but he's focused on more sublime matters, then he is on the journey of the prophecy. Keshura tachas akise, and his mind is linked to what's going on underneath the kisei hakavod. What's going on underneath the kisei hakavod? Good stuff. Essentially the chayis. The angels call them the chayis, which is really the way that God is running the world. He's interested in how God runs the world. He's interested in the world of elikus, of godliness. All of his kind of self-perfection down here just allows him to be suitable to experience the higher sublime reality of spiritual existence. And that's a broadcast, like we said, that it's always available, but we get lost in this world. And after the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, it became very difficult not to be caught up in this world. We forget. There's so many things that we do and that a Jew believes in, which keep us connected to something bigger. How about this one? Making a bracha. When you make a bracha before you eat food, the idea is that I'm not just about to be like a regular animal. I never saw an animal make a bracha. And correct me if I'm wrong. They just eat. The lion says, I'm hungry, and it just devours. It's as simple as that. So the human being is not just another mammal that, okay, I'm hungry, I eat. The human being is able to stop oneself and acknowledge, where does this food come from?
Does a person have to try to become a Rabbi?
In the ladder of Pinchas ben Yair, which is basically the ladder of self-perfection,
Have to climb?
the job, well, you don't have to climb the whole way, because like the Ramchal describes for us, through Nikias is what you're required to do. Above that, Precious and Chassidus and so forth, which ultimately leads to resurrection of the dead and prophecy, Ruach HaKodesh, that is already the realm of Chassidus. That's beyond. So, you don't have to receive prophecy. You don't have to totally perfect yourself. But what did I trade? I traded fressing out a little bit for 100 years or so.
No, I'm speaking of real people that hear this. Let's say you're talking about meditating on deep, and the average guy, let's say he's 45, 50 years old, let's say he's successful, let's say he's a vice president at Goldman Sachs, he's in the office by 9:30, he's coming home at 10 p.m. at night, he's at board meetings, interest rates, dividends, bonds, all these things. It's like 8 hours of meditation. Like,
who said 8 hours?
I'm saying, how's he built it? Like, where am I? He's like, I'm trying to maybe down in the middle of the meeting today, and I'm trying to...
So I want to tell this vice president of Goldman Sachs, and I want to say to him, what's life all about? What is the purpose of life?
I have to pay tuition for my kids.
Is that the purpose?
At the minimum.
Is that the purpose?
He said, what am I supposed to do? Not pay tuition for my kids?
Of course you have to pay tuition.
How? What job?
Okay, fine. There's no other jobs.
That make $400,000 or $500K a year?
You need to make, first of all the money that you're going to have was not decided on Rosh Hashanah?
He said, fine, but I need to know all my schedules. What am I doing? Just vibing and hoping.
We're not vibing. Why don't we make? For sure, you have to work. The word of the Rambam is also the Navi is. Remember, the Navi was an Ashir. The Navi was an Ashir.
Wow.
Okay, we're gonna have to talk about that. It looks like there's no stira that the Navi can't be working in Goldman Sachs as long as he's not lost in Goldman Sachs.
I'm saying the things we're talking about now, those deeply meditative power. You could foresee someone who like 9 to 9, he's working in the bank.
I think he might have to go to a Rabbi Dovber's seminar,
Right.
and he might have to go and have some weekend retreat to just pop him out of being in the rat race.
Right.
Like if you win the rat race, you're still the rat. To pop out of that consciousness for a little bit and think, what am I doing this for? What is it all for? Tuition? Okay, fine. And what else? What is this really for? If I forget about God the entire day, but Baal Hashem, I make some money, am I really activating what I'm here to do? Even I'm saying as a tzaddik, am I really making minute by minute, second by second, good free will decisions of tapping into God consciousness?
Like you're saying, don't be in the rat race. He's like, okay, I understand.
Don't be, no. I'm going to do a new thing. You can be in it, but don't be of it.
Nice.
Don't be of the rat race. You could be in it,
Follow
but you're above it. You see the whole thing. You're making strategic moves because that's an important thing, but you're not of it. You're not saturated with its tachbulo isav, with the hevle azman. You're aware of these things. And then you also start making decisions like, do I need to put in those extra hours?
Maybe I can leave at 7 p.m., learn instead of coming at 10 p.m.
Even though, but wait a second, but how could you do that? All the partners say that, you got to be there until 10. Really? I have to be? Is that like a Halach L'Moshe Sinai? Do I? And the person who's growing wiser just starts asking himself those questions. Just have honest thinking about his life. And this begins a process of refinement. And yes, he does start going up. He starts being able to understand what's going on in the higher realms. This would also be understanding, you could say, learning Kabbalah. Starting a Seder. There's somebody that we learn with. I don't know why. Most of the time I say I have no idea what we're talking about, but there's a very fine Yid who is very much in the business world. And we're learning a certain sefer, like an introductory sefer to certain things in Kabbalah. So he's totally in the working world, but he's carved out time where he says, I want to understand a little bit. Lahavin ba'oisan atsuras hakadoshas hataharas. That's tachas kisei hakavod. Like, I do want to be shaykh to that, even though he's taking meetings and he's traveling, he's doing all these things. But I want to begin this process of. So he carved out time, and he's prioritizing this. Like they always say, a famous thing: if you only have 30 minutes a day to learn Torah, what should you learn? So people say, Gemara, you gotta know Gemara. No, halacha. So I one time heard an answer that you should learn Musar. Musar, what do you mean? Like halakha? No, because you learn Musar, you'll realize you have more than 30 minutes a day to learn Torah. We should be Zaycha Mamish to Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mhera Min Amen. Amen.